Hi everyone, sorry about that. I think there was a technical hitch, but I hope everyone can hear me now and can see the slides. I'll start over. I'll introduce myself again. So I'm Stephanie Morris. I'm the Director for Industry Partnerships and Commercialisation for Medicine at Imperial College London. And I'm also working closely with the social enterprise that we've formed, VacEquity Global Health. And I'm here today to talk to you about the wild ride that has been the last few months of establishing this social enterprise and bringing a vaccine against COVID-19 to the world as our efforts to help address the global pandemic that we find ourselves in today. It has been a privilege working with VacEquity Global Health, and I really do hope that you do enjoy hearing the story that I'm about to tell. So we're very familiar with all the events that have unfolded since December 2019 last year that have led to us experiencing this pandemic. At that time at the Imperial level, one of our own professors, Professor Robin Shattuck, he's the chair for mucosal infection and immunology, pictured here on the bottom right-hand corner, was already working on a new vaccine technology, a self-amplifying RNA technology. He was actually developing a candidate vaccine for another pathogen of interest. But when word broke out that there was a new coronavirus that was infecting people, and the Chinese scientists subsequently released the genetic sequence of that coronavirus, Robin Shattuck and the team pivoted their research program and straight away started developing a vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, incorporating this self-amplifying RNA technology. And so our adventure began. I've borrowed this slide from Professor Sir John Bell, as I really liked the phrase that he used recently in an interview when he was describing that time. He stated that we were headed into the jungle without a machete. And I like that phrase because I think that's how some of us at Imperial College felt as well. We had a new saRNA technology for vaccine development that had never been tested in humans before. There was a new coronavirus infecting people that we knew very little about and we're still learning about today. And of course, there was also a global pandemic emerging that was sweeping across the world, impacting the lives of everyone. So what is self-amplifying RNA technology? Well, it is a piece of genetic material. It's a set of instructions, and it's not unlike the vaccine technology that you've heard a lot about in the press lately from Pfizer-BioNTech, in that it's a set of instructions that tells the cell to make a particular protein. In this instance, it's the SARS-CoV-2 spike glycoprotein. This is a protein that's expressed on the cell surface of the virus that the body elicits an immune response to. So our saRNA technology does have a point of differentiation though. Not only do our set of instructions tell the cell to make this spike glycoprotein, but also another protein, a separate protein featured here on the on the left-hand side in pink, which is an RNA polymerase. It's a replicase protein. And as the name suggests, what that tells the cell to do is to make replicates of that initial set of instructions such that we end up with multiple copies of that spike protein on the right-hand side there. So our set of instructions, our piece of genetic material, we encapsulate in a fat droplet. That's that globule there on the right-hand side. That helps protect degradation of our nucleic acid, but also encourages uptake into the cell. And once our saRNA gets into the cell, you can see the polymerase action kick in and replications of that initial set of instructions being made and resulting in lots and lots of this spike protein being generated. All this activity happens in the cytoplasm. There is no penetration into the nucleus. That's that big feature there in the cell in the bottom left-hand corner. And it doesn't happen forever. The replication phase lasts for a few days, but what it does do is generate a lot of expression of that spike glycoprotein and it tells the body to mount quite a strong immune response to the spike protein. So the idea is that we have quite a high potency vaccine and can elicit a strong response to SARS-CoV-2 infection. Now, I said that our set of instructions tells the cell to make a specific part of the virus. It's only one component, it's not the whole virus. This is that component here. This is a structure of the viral spike glycoprotein. And the reason I pull this out in particular is because the set of instructions has to be quite precise. We need this cell to make the viral spike protein exactly to mimic how the natural conformation that we see with the virus itself. So our set of instructions tells the cell to make it in its pre-fusion conformation, which is a stabilized trimer. It's really important that the cell gets this right, because the antibodies that the body needs to make against this particular protein needs to be spot on, so that when the natural virus comes along, it recognizes it immediately and can mount the right immune response to the infection. So who is VacEquity Global Health? Well, we are a social enterprise, and like everything about this pandemic, its formation was very rapid. So within a 3-week time frame, not only had we established the social enterprise, VacEquity Global Health, we had also established the governance structure sitting around the social enterprise and had executed the license between Imperial College and VacEquity Global Health to develop the vaccine technology for SARS-CoV-2. This week was a special occasion for us. We turned 5 months old, so we are very early in our life cycle. Being a social enterprise, we do have a very socially focused mission at our heart, and that is about delivering an equitable vaccine for rapid deployment across the world. And also being a social enterprise, when we do generate profits, those profits aren't distributed to shareholders. Instead, profits are earmarked to support further research and development, and particularly in the area of infectious diseases. Bringing this COVID-19 vaccine to the market is very much a partnership between Imperial College and VacEquity Global Health. Imperial College London has sponsored the clinical work that's been undertaken to date and will continue to do so, while VacEquity Global Health's remit is about overseeing the manufacturing and supply chain. So looking to not only supply vaccine product for the clinical work, but also for rollout should we be successful in getting this vaccine to the world. The VacEquity Global Health social enterprise is at its early stages, as I said, and very much running like a startup company, very light touch on its operating resources. And we purposely moved forward with this arrangement because we wanted this vaccine to be made available on parity, to make the vaccine as affordable as possible so that it would be as accessible as possible to everyone around the world. So what have we achieved so far, this VacEquity Global Health and Imperial College partnership? Well, we've completed preclinical studies where we looked at antibody or binding antibody generation and neutralization in a variety of animal models. And what you can see here on the right-hand side are some early results from using this vaccine in mice. We vaccinated mice 2 doses. They got a dose at week 0 and week 4 across a variety of doses as well. So 0.1 micrograms, 1 microgram and 10 micrograms. And what we saw was a good generation of binding antibodies. So much so they were higher levels than what we saw in samples collected from patients that had recovered from COVID-19. We also saw that this correlated quite well to neutralization as well. So binding antibody production and neutralization mapped quite efficiently. So these positive preclinical studies enabled us to get into the clinic. And we did exactly that in June this year. We started our combined phase 1/2A study. So that looked at safety and immunogenicity of the vaccine. And we took learnings from our preclinical studies. So we looked at a range of doses again, starting at 0.1 micrograms all the way through to 10 micrograms. And we took that approach because, remembering, this was the first time that saRNA technology had been in people. So we took a cautious approach when we entered into the clinic. I'm pleased to say we've administered this vaccine to well over 400 participants now across quite a wide range of ages. In fact, we're actually coming to the end of our vaccinations and expecting some key data for us within the next fortnight, followed by some more complete data coming off the weeks after that, which will really help inform us the optimal dose to move forward to efficacy studies, which are essentially our phase 3 studies. So that's a much larger study than what we've been undertaking to date. And we're quietly confident that we will be able to progress, that those results that we're expecting will be positive, because so far we've seen that our vaccine appears well tolerated, and again, early indications of a strong dose response effect across both binding and neutralizing antibodies. So all going well. We're hoping that we'll start our phase 3 efficacy study in January next year. In parallel, we've got our manufacturing activities also underway. One of the other points of difference of setting up a social enterprise to develop this vaccine, instead of partnering with a pharma company doing it on our own, is that we've managed to establish a full manufacturing process and supply chain that incorporates contract manufacturing organisations. So we have a lot of flexibility in how we produce this vaccine, and that lends itself quite nicely to this distributed manufacturing model which we're working towards. So that will ultimately result in a number of manufacturing sites across the world that can supply vaccine at a more regional scale in the areas in which they operate. Because we are a self-amplifying technology, and the idea is that we should be able to get good immune responses from lower doses, it means that our manufacturing footprint should be comparatively smaller compared to some of the other vaccine candidates that are in development at the moment, again lending itself quite nicely to this distributed manufacturing arrangement. So it has been a pretty crazy time this year, that's for sure. And one thing that both Imperial College and VacEquity Global Health has learned is to ride the storm. In 5 months, the partnership has achieved what would ordinarily have taken 5 years to achieve. But of course, these are no ordinary times. But it's not over yet. We recognise there is a lot of work to still be undertaken. We're still very much in the jungle, but we like to think at least we're starting to carve a path forward now. If there's one message that I would like to leave the audience with, is that we are very much open for business. We've read a lot in the press lately about some very encouraging results for vaccine progression. As at today, we still don't have a vaccine on the market. So VacEquity Global Health is very much still interested to hear about any complementary initiatives or exercises that will help achieve our social mission of getting this vaccine to market as cheaply and as quickly as possible. So thank you very much for listening to quite a short presentation. Hopefully it has been insightful and interesting. I'm happy to take questions, and please do get in touch offline as well if you feel that mode is more appropriate. So I have some questions popping up on the right-hand side here. I've allowed about 10 minutes for Q&A, so hopefully we'll get through most of these. I'll start at the top. When do you think the distribution will be ready? It's a good question, actually. For the time being, our focus very much is on getting the vaccine through the regulatory framework and getting it approved to the next stage. So the distribution is on our agenda. It will be secondary to making sure that the vaccine obviously is appropriate for global use in the first instance. But the manufacturing piece is an exercise that we're very much looking at in parallel to our clinical work. For the distribution of the vaccines, who should be vaccinated first? Who would you prioritise? Again, a great question. The government's spoken a lot about making sure the first instance the vaccines are available to the vulnerable population, and we certainly support that view. What we are also quite focused on as well is making sure that this vaccine or any vaccine is available to low middle income countries as well, which is why we set up the social enterprise in the first instance. I think we've seen, again, a lot in the press about the US and developed nations already having pre-purchased a lot of vaccine candidates, and we hope that that approach is also adopted by low middle income countries for affordable vaccines too. Okay, I've got another question here. How do you decide who you partner with for supplying, developing and producing vaccines? Well, it's a framework for the decision making, to be honest, very much driven by whether or not they share the same ethos as us, making sure that the vaccine can be made available to low middle income countries as well as developed nations. But also technical ability plays a big part too. This is a new technology, the self-amplifying RNA. It varies. Well, it's quite a departure from how conventional vaccines are made. So the manufacturers need to be able to have that technical capability as well in being able to manufacture and supply this particular vaccine candidate. And I've got another question here. How does this particular vaccine compare to others being developed? They mentioned China and Russia, but I think it's a more general question. Of the COVID-19 vaccines that are in development at the moment, they're quite varied in the technology that they lend themselves to or that they borrow from. Some focus on protein generations. Some others, like ours, focus on nucleic acid. It's quite varied approach to the vaccine development, which I think is appropriate. You'll need a good mix of types of vaccines because they'll have different effects in how they protect individuals from COVID-19. So a nice mix is actually a desirable end result. So I've got quite a long question here, or it's a number of questions within one, so I'll read it as we go. Do you think that nowadays, with COVID times, people have started paying more attention to the procedure of producing vaccines and their producers? Do you consider that a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think non-specialist people, speaking as if they were online experts, the topic of social media, how can or could this phenomenon be problematic? A lot of questions in there. First of all, I think it has been one of the silver linings, I guess, of this pandemic is that it has enabled a lot of new technologies and vaccine development to come forward. I spoke about today how we've achieved in 5 months what would ordinarily have taken 5 years. That's not an uncommon story for some of the vaccines in development. There has been a rapid developing program across a number of countries, which is only a good thing. We've experienced pandemics in the past, and I dare say we will again in the future. So having that preparedness will only be beneficial. So putting vaccines in the spotlight, in my view, is a good thing. Being ready to address the next pandemic, I think we've achieved a lot on the back of this particular pandemic. I'm not sure I've answered that question, but I hope it's added a little bit more information. The development, so the next question I've got here, the development of a vaccine will be very fast. Isn't it dangerous to develop a vaccine so quickly? Is there a risk that the first vaccines developed may not be effective? So absolutely, the vaccine development timelines are extremely accelerated, but that's not to say that they've been reckless. The rigour is still applied to an accelerated process as well. There are regulatory bodies, not only in the UK where I'm based, but each country has their own regulatory framework for progressing the development of drugs and vaccines. They are very much involved in this process and review data every step of the way. So when I talked about our own vaccine potentially moving to phase 3 studies, we will only do so on the basis that the regulators give us approval. So they will scrutinise the data that we present to them. So it is an accelerated pace. I wouldn't say it's a dangerous pace by any means. There is a lot of rigour that is applied to vaccine development still. But we will continue to learn more as we go through this developmental process too. The first vaccines developed may not be effective. I don't think they will get to market if they're not effective. They will need to demonstrate a level of activity against COVID-19 infection and disease manifestation. And I think it will need a variety of vaccines, though, to have a good effect as well. People are different, vaccines are different, so it's really about optimising outcomes in that regard. Another question here, how important do you think communicating with the general public on the progress of vaccines is? Absolutely, communication with the general public is a key aspect. It's important that the general public are well informed. They can make their own decisions about engagement with vaccines and how to make themselves available for vaccination programs, and are well informed about giving consent to vaccinations or not. I would encourage people, obviously, to be open to vaccinations against COVID-19. But I agree that a communication strategy for the general public is of utmost importance. So I can't see any more questions popping up. Sorry, one more has just arrived. What would you ask policymakers to do to improve current efforts on vaccine research? In the current environment, the policymakers have actually been really responsive. So we've seen governments around the world accommodating these accelerated approvals and review processes. They've been very much on board getting behind finding a solution for the current global pandemic. So I would ask that they continue to do that. It's amazing what can be achieved when everyone is working collegially together in the global interest. So I don't have a criticism of the policymakers at this point in time. I think the work that they've done has been really beneficial and accommodating to achieve good outcomes on a global scale. Another question here, how good is the communication among vaccine developers? Extremely good. So, and I think that's indicative of the scientific community in general. It's very much based on sharing research findings. Everyone has been extremely quick to publish their own findings and their own discoveries, particularly around COVID-19. I mentioned early on that the Chinese scientist publicised the genetic sequence for coronavirus early on in January this year, and that enabled global efforts to move forward quite rapidly in developing a vaccine and other treatments against COVID-19. So the communication among the scientists around the world has been excellent. Okay, I'm conscious there's 1 minute left. I hope that that's been interesting. Thank you very much to the conference organisers for the opportunity to talk. Thank you to the audience for listening and for the questions. And please do follow up with me offline if there are any other points of interest you'd like to raise. Thanks very much.